Hello and welcome back to another Out of Spec Reviews video. In this video, we are going to try a new style of video where we kind of take all of our little reviews, bunch them up into one final thoughts episode. So, sometimes we drive cars up in the city, in the canyons, and the highway. Sometimes we do full walk-arounds. Here, we're going to drive the car, and I'm going to take you on a full tour in more of a condensed version. So, let's get into it with this 2021 Chevrolet Trailblazer. This is the 2021 Chevy Trailblazer as mentioned, and it really slots, just under the Equinox and over the Trax. It's a small SUV style of vehicle. This particular one is the active trim. So in the active trim, join me. I'll pop the hood really quick and show you what you get. You get a little tiny 1.3 liter 3-cylinder engine, which is just insanely small, but that's actually the upgraded engine over the 1.2 liter, which is crazy. Under the hood here, we have that 3-cylinder engine, makes about 155 horsepower. It's mated to a 9-speed automatic. So let's talk about how that all works. If you get any front-wheel drive version of the Trailblazer, you get a CVT transmission, and you can get either the 1.2 liter, which makes about 134 horsepower, or the 1.3 liter 3-cylinder, and both mated front-wheel drive to the CVT. If you get all-wheel drive, surprisingly, you can get this active, the off-roading trim in front-wheel drive, which makes no sense to me, but you get a 9-speed torque converter automatic, which is, I believe, the same exact unit out of the Chevy Blazer that we recently tested here on this channel. Great transmission. We'll drive it and I'll show you some weird quirks about it, but fairly good. Come around, I'll take you on a quick tour. The active trim gives you these sort of off-road styled wheels. They're from Hankook, but it's an all-season tread pattern with the design to make it look like an all-terrain tire. So again, I think this car is more about looks more so than function. However, we have another channel called Out of Spec Motoring where we used this as a support vehicle earlier in our week of testing, and it was unbelievably capable on some rutted dirt roads and undulations. It's really the right size. It's got quite a bit of ground clearance, and that 3-cylinder is a great bunch of low down torque to get you out of a sticking point. So here in the active trim, I really like this sort of white pearlescent paint with this bronzish roof. I think it looks good. Alyssa hates it. My girlfriend hates it. So to each their own. Here on the back, of course, you have the all-wheel drive and the active denotion. This car starts at $19,000 base price, and it goes up to here, again, maxed out at around $31,000, $32,000. The L trim is base, then it goes LS, LT, and then it splits off. Either you can get a sporty one, RS, or the active one, the off-roady one here. And so they're both about the same price, $31,000 and a bit. Take a look at the trunk. No power trunk lid here. Fairly good size. You can see nice flat load floor. The back seats do fold down. I'll show you that here in a second. And a really neat feature is, take a look at this. You get a really nice spare. Certainly not a full size, nothing crazy, but very rarely do we test cars these days with spare tires. So that's great to have, of course, especially as this is something that you can take out on the trail, and it gave me a little bit more peace of mind. I'm going to fold down these seats really quick. You guys stay there. Let's take a look as to what these look like. So folding nice and flat here. Let me do this one as well. There we go. The weird thing here, though, this is the first time I'm doing it, you get this gap. Take a look at this underneath the seats. Now this cannot come any more forward, so you can kind of lose objects down in this little hole, which I'm not so sure that's the best integration of a flat folding seat. I haven't seen that many times, but it's here at least in the Trax. Let's jump inside. Let's test the back seat room. So jumping here into the back seat. Really good legroom. Again, this seat's set to someone normal sitting. You have just one sort of very high center pocket here. If you take a look, it does go deep all the way down. This is not a pocket down here, but overall great. I have a center armrest. Again, this is a small, compact utility vehicle and feels pretty good. Nice little drink cup holder thing. These lights, though, take a look in here at these light fixtures up here. This is about as old and cheap GM as you can get. Man, is that ugly. So you do get a little bit of that sort of hints of poor quality throughout the vehicle. But overall, I would say the car is pretty solid. When you slam the door, solid. Doesn't give you a really thin tin can feeling. Trunk, let's test this one. felt nice. A little bit of rattle coming from up here, but overall, I'd say it's a fairly good build. Let's jump over to the fuel tank here, because this is where we can talk about fuel economy. In our 70-mile-per-hour highway MPG testing, this thing averaged mid 30 mile per gallon range, which is really fantastic. So cruising down the highway at 70, you're gonna get in the mid 30s. Let's say you drive 80, maybe low 30s. That's pretty impressive, considering this one is the off-roady one with the big engine with all-wheel drive. Interestingly, I keep mentioning this 1.2, 1.3 three-cylinder difference, because to me, why even have that difference? I can't figure it out, but I'm sure there's some cost savings there. The 1.3 liter gets more fuel economy than the 1.2. I guess the 1.2 just has to work harder to keep the thing moving, but that's my guess. Let's jump inside of the Trailblazer, where I'm going to jump in there and we are going to take it for a drive. This is the key for the Trailblazer. So you have unlock, lock, remote start, and alarm. Pretty nice key, fairly standard for Chevrolet products. On their lower trims, their nicer ones get the square key. So you always know if you have a nice Chevrolet, if you get the square key, or if you have sort of a lower end or entry level model, you get the orb key. Anyway, foot on the brake. Starting it up, comes into life pretty nicely. For a three-cylinder, which is a naturally unbalanced engine, it has a really smooth idle, which I find to be very impressive, of course. In terms of seating position, I can raise and lower the front and the back of the seat. The passenger seat is really the biggest downside of this car, because you get no height adjustment and no lumbar control. So the passenger kind of sits really high. I find it to be a quite uncomfortable seating position. But here in the driver's seat is great full motion of the steering wheel as well, so I can get it exactly where I want it. Really love the driving position. I have room to man spread out here. Everyone always yells at me when I use that term, but this is, you know, I can just spread all the way. Great, comfortable for long trips. I was able to take this on about a 250-mile trip in one go, and was extremely comfortable throughout the entire drive. This is your infotainment system. I believe it's a 9-inch screen or 8-inch screen. Either way, big enough, I think. Fits well in this car. Unlike the Blazer that we tested, that screen seemed to be a little bit too small for the car. This fits it nicely. Wireless CarPlay, Android Auto, everything you can want. No navigation here in this car, which I find interesting. The only way to get navigation is by using Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. So if you travel frequently in areas without cell service, that might be a deterrent, and I'm not sure if it's an option or not. Anyway, this one doesn't have it, at least. Again, this one's $31,300. Let's take it for a drive into drive. Now we have a few different driving modes and switches up here, from auto start, stop, off. We have our auto lanes, departure warning, traction control, 2 levels of that. You push it once, turns off the traction control. You push and hold, turns off stability control. Then we have sport mode, and then we can engage our on-demand all-wheel drive system. Interestingly, if you're in front-wheel drive and you're spinning your front tires, it doesn't actually tell you to turn on, or it doesn't automatically turn on all-wheel drive. It just says, hey, we suggest that you use all-wheel drive. It's like, well, you already know it, just put the damn thing on. So I find that to be an odd quirk with this system. You join us out on the road now, it's gonna be foot down, drops a few gears, builds boosts, and we're off. It's such an interesting power plant, because it's so torquey and it gives you the sense that it's really working. It actually feels pretty quick and pleasant. Like, I've enjoyed getting in this car and running errands and having quick bursts of acceleration up onto the road. The on paper numbers are not good. This is like 9 seconds, 0 to 68 in a second, somewhere around there. It would make you think it's slow, but because it's got so much torque and it's geared really well, it actually feels a lot quicker than it is. So you put your foot down and you get this nice wave of, I would say, a very premium drivetrain. It feels very much like a BMW i8 3-cylinder, or same engine that's in the base Mini Cooper, but it sounds cooler when you say i8, because it just feels so well engineered, and for a 3-cylinder, very balanced and smooth torque curve all the way out. Interestingly, this engine upshifts at about 5,500 RPM when you're at wide open throttle, maybe 5,400. And the reason that's interesting is because redline isn't until you reach about 6,500 RPM. So when you're all the way up there, you can reach redline by using the shift controls here on the shifter, it doesn't make sense to rev this engine all the way out because it's so torquey and it makes its peak power a little bit lower in the band. GM doesn't let it rev all the way out in automatic mode. So I find that to be really good engine transmission calibration. This 9-speed is fantastic in the way that it shifts gears and the way that it kind of always knows where you want to be. It's really matched well to this engine. You never get any unwanted shifts or anything like that. So from a drivetrain perspective, really good. From a capability perspective, off-road, take a look again at our out-of-spec motoring video, because on the trail, this car was awesome. I mean, we just pointed it up some really steep, rocky, rugged terrain. Nothing that's like rock crawling, but serious terrain. Sort of kind of looks like this hill on our left. And it just, you know, climbed its way up like a mountain goat. So I was impressed. Now, to downshift, I can pull the shifter into L, and then I have some buttons on the left side to play around. I've actually been driving this car a lot with the manual shift controls, except it's not a manual shift control. It's a gear limiter. This is how GM's been doing a lot of their non-sports car transmission tuning, and this bugs me. I hate this. So what a gear limiter is, separate from a manual transmission or a manual gear selection, is the gear limiter says don't go higher than 3rd gear, like I'm telling it now, or we can say don't go higher than 5th gear. But until it reaches 5th gear, it operates normally. It's not going to lock itself into 5th gear with this. So I find that to be a little bit odd, especially when I want to ride a torque curve out of a corner, let's say from 3,000 RPM up to 5,000. If I have it locked in 5th gear, it might downshift to 4th or 3rd. Also, the gearing gear ratios are very odd between gear 2 and 3. There's almost no noticeable difference between the two. I'm going to demonstrate. So I'm going to lock us into 2nd gear here. Take a listen as to the gear ratio between 2 and 3. That's 2, 3. It just is like 150 RPM difference. I don't even know why you have that gear there. It must have something to do with magazine 0 to 60 time testing. But it's such a close gear ratio. When you drive it in normal drive, though, these are things that you don't notice. These are things I'm picking up on as I'm driving it, because I'm reviewing the Chevy Trailblazer from an enthusiast standpoint, more or less. But you know, the driving dynamics on the back roads like this are fine as long as you're not pushing the car. This is not a sports car. It doesn't respond well to sports car type inputs. It really likes a smooth in, smooth out, let the weight transfer, but it's a very sophisticated ride and suspension. It is quite firm, but I've heard from some friends that have reviewed this car that they've said it's like unbearably firm and rough on some roads, and I do not get that impression at all. This car, and it could just be because this is the active trim. The active trim gives you skid plates and a different revised suspension and those Hankook sort of all-terrain styled tires that I showed you. And it could be that the active just rides better than the others. I haven't sampled the others, but I will say this has been a more than adequate ride, and I would say tuned nearly perfectly if I were to take the balance between off-road comfort, on-road highway cruising, and then you know, sort of back road blasting. I think this is a great compromise for this vehicle. Overall, cruising down the highway, of course, I do want to mention it. We're not taking it on the highway in this video, but we do have other videos I'll link below showing you how all the driver assistance works, the adaptive cruise control and things like this. Pretty good systems, recognizes humans, pedestrians, of course, and other traffic. It does not do active lane centering, which bugs me, but at least on the highway, you can set it on adaptive cruise. It pushes you back in if you hit a line, and a very comfortable cruiser. Like I said, I did over 200 miles in a day in this car, running a quick for our video, and man, was it just awesome. So this car is a real serious vehicle. I came into it with low expectations. We actually came out of its bigger brother, the Chevy Blazer, and then we got into this vehicle. And typically you always want to go up when you're reviewing cars. You never want to go, you know, downgrade. But I would say I much prefer this to the bigger Blazer. This is the one I would buy at least, and you save some money. I just love this engine and transmission combo. Just sounds so nice and real meaty. And I love the size of this car. You can place it where you want. You have great visibility. The C-pillars do have a bit of a blind spot, at least on the highway. However, you do have blind spot monitoring, which is great. overall, great package, priced really well. Entry level, the L model is $19,000, like I mentioned. This one optioned up. I don't know if I'd go all the way to the active, maybe, but I imagine this is going to be a, let's put, $3,000 down, and what's it going to be per month on a lease type of car. So each trim will lease out differently based on the time of the year and different stuff like that. So overall, gotta say, love it. Really good car. Very much impressed with the quality, the driving dynamics, and especially this engine. I think the price is spot on, especially when you compare it to more premium alternatives like the Mini Countryman in this sizing point. This is $10,000 less for a comparably equipped Mini, and a great car overall. So thanks so much for watching another Out of Spec Reviews video. Hope you enjoyed the Trailblazer as much as we have, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.